Everyone is calling for renewable energies, and here a wind turbine is being dismantled? For Jens Monses, this is not a contradiction, but the path to sustainability.
Dismantling a wind turbine, you always think it was put up somehow, so that's how it's dismantled. But there are no dismantling instructions, no proper tools, sometimes you even have to make your own. You have to make sure that safety at work is also a priority.
But what's all this got to do with sustainability? We've checked that out. Eight o'clock in the morning on a wind power field just outside Hanover. Today a wind turbine is coming down. The reason? Bearing damage. But what do you do with old wind turbines? The magic word, recycling. And that is unique in the whole of Europe. Might sound simple, but it's complicated. The steel towers are no problem to recycle. The challenge is the blades. They are made of glass fiber reinforced plastic. Glass fiber, reinforced plastics, or GRP for short, are composites made of polyester or epoxy resin and, logically, glass fibers. Once it has hardened, it's difficult to separate again, and it's extremely waterproof. That is why these plastics are used wherever extreme stability is required. In ships, airplanes, or even in roller coasters. Once they've done their job, the problems begin, as plastics have long been considered non-decomposable. The only option? Burning. But this only works to a limited extent and, in the long run, destroys the incinerators. The solution? A new recycling process. In just a few steps, it turns the wings into fine cement. How does it work? Step 1. Roll out the carpet.
We're now laying out the fleece where we also cut the blades later, so that afterwards we can catch the dust that's produced during cutting with water. And then it's filtered, the water runs through, and the material that remains on it is also professionally recycled afterwards.
To make it all work, team spirit is needed.
Well, I'm in the office a lot, so it's nice to be out here doing my bit.
One thing is still missing: water. This binds a large part of the dust on the fleece and prevents it simply being blown into the environment. Recycling the blades is worthwhile, because the glass fibers are made of raw sand. This special sand is the #1 building material worldwide. Amount needed per year, 30 billion tons. Cost per ton, €12. But so far, no one's been interested in GRP recycling. The reason is that recycling is far too complicated. Frank Kroll sees things differently. That's why 6 years ago he started the revolution.
If we find ways to extract raw sand from other known recyclables, then it's our damn duty to think about it and find ways to do it.
And in the blades there's quite a bit of raw sand, up to 10 tons depending on the size.
We're talking about 34 meters of rotor blades per unit, and I think you only see the size when you're down here.
But to get the sand out, the blades first have to come down. A week earlier, the team dismantles the blades by hand. This requires strong nerves and strong cranes. Dismantling takes a whole day. Only on the ground do the helpers separate the blades from the hub. Once everything's in place, the noisiest step can begin: cutting them. The 34 meters are now cut into 6-meter-long sections. This is the only way to fit everything into the container. Another advantage is that measuring means fewer cuts and less dust. A bonus point in terms of sustainability. But now, let's get to work and cover our ears. All this trouble for the perfect cut. Water's needed so that the saw doesn't overheat. Hand on heart, a huge saw and lots of action sounds like a real dream job, doesn't it?
No matter how old you are, I think we're all still little kids. Big machines, lots of noise, I think everybody likes that.
In addition to the GRP, the blades are also made of wood, construction foam and an earthing cable. The fine glass fibers really put the saw to the test. The diamond saw blade lasts for about 8 rotary blades. But what happens to the pieces now? Architects, furniture makers and others have already thought about that. For example, there is a windmill garden furniture made of rotor blades, or slides for children. The advantage is they last forever. There could even be wind turbines in your house. The new recycling method quickly turns them into cement, and that's in the walls of lots of houses. The recycling process is supposed to be sustainable and environmentally friendly. That's why the blades are put in the container for the time being. Now we can see whether the measurements were correct. If everything fits, the parts can now go to the special factory. Good for us, but that is not yet the case everywhere in the world. On the internet, we find pictures from the USA. Here, for example, rotor blades from old wind turbines are not dismantled, but simply buried in the desert. Nobody here wants that.
I think what we're showing here now is the right way to increase acceptance, to convince people and say, we're doing it right, we're doing it sensibly, and we're also doing it for you. And also for the future, for our descendants, so that they might still be able to experience this planet.
To make sure this works, they are now going to Germany's only factory that managed to recycle GRP, something factory manager Hans-Dieter Wilken is very proud of.
You think up something, you try to realize it, and suddenly you're standing on the stage in Berlin at the Green Tech Award, and we get the prize for having come up with the recycling idea of the year. And of course, that made us incredibly proud.
Glass fiber has been around in industry since 1935, recycling only for a few years. But meanwhile, the method has been refined. And it looks like this. The materials are mixed with waste paper residues and go into a kind of meat grinder. A large roller grinds everything to about 30 centimeters. But that's not enough. We need it much smaller so that the glass fibers can be properly utilized. Only when everything is small enough can the chips crystallize into cement. For this, we need powerful helpers. More precisely, huge ion chains. And they are at the heart of the plant, the cross-flow shredder. A really nasty name. Not a new invention, but indispensable for shredding GRP. The whole thing works like in a centrifuge. The revolutions create a kind of tornado that presses everything against the wall and dries it at the same time. Stefan Groß knows exactly how everything works.
Our cross-flow shredder basically has 2 chains like this, which rotate at 680 revolutions, and everything that gets in the way of these chains is smashed to pieces.
In simple terms, it works like this. The metal chains thrash the material until the pieces fit through the holes. The small snippets then end up in a warehouse. The plant processes about 30,000 tons of glass fiber reinforced plastics every year.
This is not a process where you can say that it's bought off the shelf, that it always works the same way. We have to put a lot of sweat and energy into it so that it works every day.
There's still one final step to complete the recycling. The finished mixture is now sent to the cement works, and they turn it into, well, what do you think? Exactly, cement. And it works very simply. The chipping mixture goes into a 30-meter-long drum in the cement plant. The temperature in the drum is 1,200 degrees, so all the waste paper burns almost without pollutants. At the bottom, all that remains of the rotor blade is cement, and you can then buy it in DIY stores.
It's an innovation. We simply have to promote it and convince people and say, look, we can do it like this. We have a solution, and that's something that makes you really proud.
And this solution is unique in Europe. Discarded glass fiber reinforced plastics can be recycled. For example, in the foundations of new, even more effective wind turbines, or as valuable cement, perhaps even in your next construction project, a perfect recycling cycle.
We travel to the state of Montana in the USA, where we meet Curtis and accompany him to his next project. He wants to plug an oil well that's releasing a lot of emissions. A risky job.
Today we're going to be working on some legacy oil wells that are nearly 100 years old that have been emitting methane gas into the atmosphere for decades.
Curtis worked in the oil industry himself for a long time, but only much later did he realize there's a dirty secret in the air here and he wants to get rid of it. That's why he's set up a foundation that's financed by donations, because he doesn't earn anything from sealing wells. In fact, it costs him a lot of money.
I couldn't believe that anybody would have left something like that behind. To me, it was completely mind-blowing. I was embarrassed. I was alarmed.
This is an open borehole. There's a strong smell of gas around the former oil field. Curtis regularly checks how much methane is coming out of this borehole. For a long time, it was not mandatory for oil companies to plug the holes. Last year, the US government allocated $4.7 billion to seal the wells. Those who want to take the money are allowed to use it to seal officially documented wells. Critics claim that only amounts to about 20% of the estimated 2.2 million wells. At first glance, it looks as if the hole is sealed, but appearance can be deceptive. There's only a loose cover on it. More and more methane is escaping every second, a highly potent greenhouse gas that fuels global warming and is 25 times more damaging than CO2.
The well immediately goes into over limit, so that's a sign that that this is a very strongly emitting well. So now I'm going to grab the gas camera and we're going to see if we can get some images of what this gas actually looks like coming out of this well. Data is critical, right? If you can't prove it, then it never happened, and so that's why measurement is so important.
The camera visualizes the gas leak and shows the amount being released into the air.
670 metric tons per year is an extreme amount. That does make this in the super emitter category. So we're going to get this well plugged immediately.
But Curtis can't do it alone. He calls in support, and they bring along the heavy equipment.
I own all the equipment.
But is it not a very good thing to be part of it, to plug the wells?
Oh, I think it's fine. I mean, they're not doing any good, so we may as well get rid of them.
Yep, he's our contractor, so we pay him to do the work.
$30,000 in total to seal off this well. Depending on the ground conditions, the price can go up to $1 million. The 60-year-old helps out wherever he can. This drill tower is usually used to open up oil wells, not to plug them. The hole is 500 meters deep. Curtis and the crew therefore measure the length of the rods that will later be pushed down the shaft. Filling material will later flow through them. Clamping the heavy pipes in place properly is real back-breaking work. The crane then lowers them into the ground. The gas discharge must be checked and recorded regularly, because over the years, a kind of gas bubble can build up in the shaft and be stirred up by the pipes.
Oh, always dangerous working around gas.
Methane is highly flammable, even when the oil wells are still in operation. Around the so-called deep pumps, so-called dead zones can develop. They can contaminate the groundwater and the Earth's surface. And for farmers like Sam Stewart, another problem arises.
Kind of a pain to farm around. And then if some of them had oil spills, so there's the ecological cleanup that needed to be done. But mainly getting rid of the wellhead and stuff so you can farm over it's what I like best. If there's contaminated soil, they've removed it and then replaced it with soil that'll grow something that isn't sterilized from the well activity.
Mustard plants are now being planted here on a large scale. Additional farmland, thanks to our green hero. Back to Curtis's current project. The methane is to be trapped by a layer of cement.
Super excited. This is the best part of the whole job. We're getting ready to put cement down the hole right now and getting everything connected, all of the lines connected. Getting ready to put our additives in, and now it's ready to rock and roll.
The wood chips prevent cracks from forming in the material when the temperature changes.
Cement sample. So this is the old cementer's trick here to see if it's ready.
What do you think?
They're going to send it down the hole right now.
The cement is pumped through the pipes into the hole at high pressure. The borehole is being filled up from bottom to top. The first layer of cement is followed by a gel that's compressed by a second layer of cement. This creates a kind of protective shield that holds out even when the ground moves. Once the hole is completely filled, the pipes are pulled out as quickly as possible. Now, every minute counts.
The cement has a high early compound in it that makes it cure quicker. So we want to get it out of the hole as quickly as we can. Hey, you got, there you go.
The more liquid the cement is, the better it bonds with the soil, and the better it seals.
My family thinks I've lost my mind. No, I'm kidding. Actually, you know, my family is super supportive. As a father and soon to be a grandfather, that it's leading by example. And what better legacy could I leave behind?
What drives Curtis is the future of his children, because climate change is man-made. But with this idea, he can make a difference. We notice spirits start to rise as the last pipe is finally pulled out of the shaft.
Now we're going to verify with the instrumentation and be able to prove unequivocally that the gas is gone and the party is on. And there we go. Zeros across the board. No gas. Gas is gone. Well, you know, I'd like to say that it happens exactly like this every time, but every project is unique. But this was a fantastic success, and I couldn't be more thrilled.
For decades, this oil well has been releasing gases adding to the greenhouse effect on our planet. Until now. For us, he is a true green hero. Keeping cows and the associated mass production of dairy products have an image problem. The animals are responsible for a large proportion of harmful climate gases, and dairy products are still frequently transported across half of Germany. These three green heroes want to change that, and these are their solutions. A floating cowshed that shortens transport routes and still works even when sea levels rise. A cow toilet that protects the climate, and a wellness farm for dairy cows that prolongs their life. We are in the port of Rotterdam to meet Minke van Wingerden. The civil engineer has built the world's first floating cowshed. With this idea, she wants to bring the farm to the city, shorten transport routes, save carbon dioxide and establish a circular economy.
On the water, you're mostly near to cities. So this project is about future farming, future food systems, but it's also about reconnecting citizens with food production again.
But this floating farm is also a modern response to rising sea levels and a way of helping to save agricultural land.
Yeah, the world population is growing and the amount of arable land is decreasing. So it's important to look after possibilities, how can we produce more healthy food in a different way. So we use the water for it, and 70% of the world is water. So this is our pilot project to show the world that we can do it.
The floating farm is an almost self-sufficient operation. The floating solar panel field next door supplies the energy. The cow's water is purified rainwater. The feed is reprocessed waste from the city.
For example, we have a few small beer breweries over here. And up to now, the beer broth, the residual product, they send it away with a truck and it's going to be burned. But now we collect it and we feed it to our cows and they upcycle it to milk. But we also use the grass from the soccer field. And that's important because it's not only about the amount of grass, but it's also about reconnecting the citizens again.
The floating farm has 3 floors, the cowshed on top, milk production underneath, and below the waterline, manure and urine are separated and stored. Since May 2019, 34 cows have been living on the pontoon, providing around 800 litres of milk a day, as much as in a normal cowshed.
This is our milk tank, and what we see, the black pipe is connected with a milking robot. So it comes immediately down to our milk tank. Yeah, we are producing pasteurized milk, yogurt, different kinds of yogurt, but also butter and buttermilk.
Okay.
So, and we sell it in the city. We sell it to restaurants, but also to retailers.
Of course, there were concerns and objections to this type of enclosure. Not animal-friendly because it's on the water. The cows would get seasick, the milk wouldn't taste good, but Minka was able to prove them all wrong.
Good morning, cows. How are you, ladies? As you can see, the cows are so relaxed and they are so used to all the visitors. They are curious and they are doing so well. And that's the most important thing because, yes, they have to be okay.
The farm is fully automated. There are feeding robots, cleaning robots and a milking robot. The cows go to the machine independently and allow themselves to be milked. Thanks to the sustainable production under one roof and the short transport routes, the floating farm saves carbon dioxide with every litre of milk. How much is currently being scientifically investigated. The concept is so innovative that Minka has visitors from all over the world.
We are talking to China and all different kind of countries in Asia. And for example, Singapore, it imports 90% of all their food. And yeah, it's surrounded by water, so why not a floating farm?
On to the next green hero. We meet him in the small town of Groenlo in the Netherlands, less than 5 kilometers from the German border. Chris Bomers wanted to give his cows a more species-appropriate life, and the result is the world's first cow garden. It doesn't look much like a stable here, more like a spa for cows. The animals stroll relaxed around the open spaces. Those who feel like it, chill a bit on the cozy ground. Trees and bushes have been planted everywhere. The idea came from one of Chris's friends. She thought, why have a cowshed just like a normal cowshed with lots of iron and concrete? What about nature? The result of this idea is a barn that looks like a forest. This doesn't only look really good, but also corresponds to the animal's natural way of life. Cows naturally want to go out to pasture, but then they retreat back into a protected environment. They just quickly eat a lot of fresh grass in the open pasture, but then they actually go back into the forest. The concept is so unique that it was difficult to get permission for it, but for the animals, it is a genuine paradise. They can go outside, they can go inside, whatever they want. And that's also the most important thing for me, that the animal can do what it wants. Chris shows us the other part of his barn, which has not yet been converted into a cow garden. This so-called lying barn is also animal-friendly, but still has some disadvantages. The hooves are always on concrete, in a damp environment, and there's more moisture here on the left and right. And that's the big difference between the organic soil in the cow garden and the concrete floor, which is always damp. In the cow garden, the organic soil material works in principle like cat litter. Urine and feces clump together, and the litter can then be easily sieved through with a newly developed machine. The result is a soft and dry floor on which the cows like to lie, and their claws no longer become inflamed. Since the conversion to the cow garden in 2018, the cow's health has steadily improved. There are far fewer diseases, and the animals clearly feel very well. But is it also worth it financially? Do they provide more milk? They don't provide more milk per lactation, but because the well-being of the cows is better, the cow gets older, and the older the cow gets, the more milk it provides in its lifetime. And that's what farmers want. And then we hope that the cow gets as old as possible, and that's the giant step forward that we've taken here with the cow garden. On average, the cows in the cow garden live 1.5 to 2 years longer. Measured against the average lifespan of 5 years for a high-performance dairy cow, this is a great success for both humans and animals. The next green hero is also in the Netherlands, a good hour's drive from the floating farm. Jochen Tolkamp is working to reduce harmful greenhouse gases in the cowshed. His solution? A toilet for cows. Yes, that's right, cows that go to the toilet and even form an orderly queue. We have a few questions about this, but why would a cow lavatory be any use at all? The basic problem is that agricultural emissions contribute significantly to climate change. Livestock farming is responsible for producing a large proportion of the climate killers methane and nitrous oxide. Another big problem is ammonia, which is produced when urine and feces react with each other on the cowshed floor. When ammonia evaporates, it can convert into nitrous oxide, a climate killer 300 times more powerful than carbon dioxide. It also forms fine dust in the air and is harmful to health. That's why Germany has committed to reducing ammonia emissions by 29% by 2030. The solution is to separate feces and urine beforehand if possible and prevent the formation of manure in the first place. This is where the cow toilet comes in. But how does it work? The cows come in here, and when you stroke certain nerves, they have a reflex that triggers the need to urinate. We've mechanized this. The cow toilet looks for these nerves, strokes them, and then the cow urinates. It works amazingly well. With 150 animals, that's quite a considerable amount. A cow urinates about 25 litres a day, and we can collect about half of that. She has to urinate about 5 times a day, but we try to make the cow come more often. Not every attempt is successful because the cow may have already urinated in the meadow. By 2030, farmers in the Netherlands even have to reduce the amount of ammonia per cow by half. But with the cow toilet, this is easily possible. But why do the cows go to the toilet voluntarily? Because they're conditioned to do so with feed. This cow has had her portion of feed, and now the machine starts stroking her between the udder and the vulva looking for the nerve. This nerve then makes the cow think, I need to pee. A light system indicates whether the toilet visit was successful. The urine is pumped out and stored in a large silo. It can be immediately spread on the field as an organic fertilizer. The cow toilet reduces ammonia by almost half. Instead of 13 kilos per cow per year, it's now only 7 kilos. These 3 green heroes show that animal welfare and climate protection can also work in agriculture. And for the farmers, it even pays off economically too.
This is it. The running shoe that is supposed to last forever. At least that's what the name suggests. Infinite running. Durable materials and replaceable sole elements made of natural rubber supposedly make this sports shoe immortal. And believe it or not, the shoe is 100% made in Germany. Can it deliver what it promises? We've arranged to meet the inventor Nico Roos. The 26-year-old sports scientist runs 100 kilometers a week. So he is pretty fit and had to spend a lot of money on sports gear, having to buy new running shoes every 2 months. Expenditure that grinds on a true Swabian's nerves.
The material crumples up because the sole is worn out, and that's why I just wanted to develop a solution so they don't always just end up in the bin.
Nico started tinkering around at his parents' house near Biberach 4 years ago. At the time, he was still studying sports and had no idea about shoe development. But it was clear from the start, the sole had to be replaceable. His countless worn-out sports shoes served as test objects.
So in principle, it was always a huge amount of work with the scalpel. And I was convinced I was doing it with surgical precision, but of course I wasn't, and you can see what came out of it.
While other students were enjoying university life, the passionate runner was building a career for himself.
Insulating tape, and I needed loads of silicone, especially with this one. Or when I very naively just melted down toys and wanted to pour them into a wooden mould. When I went running with this on, the only thing that held it together was my guilty conscience.
Yes, Nico actually did test runs in his do-it-yourself shoes. After a few months of tinkering, lots of all-nighters and bleeding feet, he sought help from a product developer. Then he finally got to hold a prototype in his hands.
That was the first one we knew would work, and that was the shoe that I was able to run 10 kilometers in properly for the first time.
Nico Roos founded a startup and now has to hold his own in the highly competitive running shoe business. He needed a manufacturer, and that presented the young entrepreneur with the next challenge.
Yes, of course, it's difficult to find a manufacturer, especially as a startup. You can't just attach yourself to a big brand and produce your shoes in their factories, especially since a lot comes from the Far East or from Eastern European countries.
Once he even visited a factory in Serbia and was shocked by the working conditions there. The young entrepreneur had clear ideas for his shoe.
For me, sustainability goes hand in hand with fair wages. So there's no either or, it's got to be both. Otherwise, that's not the principle of sustainability.
Nico wants to produce in Germany, even though he pays 3 times the purchase price in this country, a big financial risk.
At the beginning, I went in with all my own capital. That must have been about 70,000 euros, so it was quite a lot of money.
On top, he invested another 6-figure investment amount in a business in Germany's former shoe city, Pirmasens in Rhineland-Palatinate. This is where some of Europe's best shoe manufacturers were based. Before the days of mass-produced goods from the Far East, shoe sole manufacturer Alexander Hill is the only one holding the fort. But before we talk about the replaceable studs, let's take a look at how the durable shoe is put together. First, the sole. It's made of a very special material, a polyurethane mixture specially made for Nico. The exact composition? Trade secret.
In contrast to cheaper, normal outsoles, the polyurethane material is much more resistant, yet it's very light in weight and very suitable for this type of shoe. It doesn't compress, always comes back to its original state, and is extremely durable as a result.
So why aren't all soles made of polyurethane? The answer is simple. The foamed plastic is expensive, especially if it comes from Germany. And incidentally, this is true for all materials and components of the sustainable running shoe, from the sole, the mounts for the rubber studs, right up to the adhesive. And now, good news for all animal lovers.
What people often don't realise is that slaughterhouse waste is sometimes used in lots of adhesives as an extender, and actually it doesn't belong in there at all. We work here with an adhesive without any animal waste, so we also have a vegan shoe.
The young entrepreneur is not only focused on his own success, but also thinks about open supply chains and industry standards.
In the meantime, there are hardly any shoe manufacturers producing here. There are also hardly any sole manufacturers and component manufacturers left. There's a lot imported from Asia, and we're trying to keep the workforce here with us.
And that's why Alexander Hill has decided to produce the entire shoe here. He believes in Nico's idea and has even invested in new machines and tools that he can use exclusively for the production of this running shoe. The special production feature here is that each shoe passes through the hands of trained specialists and doesn't simply come off a production line. The running shoe's upper material is also special.
Conventional shoes have the disadvantage that there's often a large proportion of plastic fibres in them, which then stretch over the instep, and incorrect positioning then often leads to these tearing points. That's why we have a more flexible fibre inside, so even if someone's toe sticks up, the material can move with it and isn't rigid, and it doesn't get porous either because it's a very pure textile.
Even the shoe box comes from Pirmasens. The young entrepreneur's efforts have paid off. He's received the patent for his idea. The Baden-Württemberg state government awarded him the Sustainability Prize. And as a startup hero and ISPO award winner, he's also attracted important cash injections. He's on a roll. So now finally to the heart of the matter, the interchangeable studs. They are also made in Germany, of course. Near Ulm, Nico Roos finds a plastic injection molding technician to fit the studs to the soles. Steffen Autenried didn't really have anything to do with shoes, but he was so enthusiastic about the idea that he joined the business as a partner.
I was fascinated by the basic idea, by this concept, and said, yes, that's really ingenious, let's see if we can do it.
Steffen Autenried, just like Nico Roos, is committed to the efficient use of plastics. Both want to contribute to revolutionizing our throwaway society.
I was well aware that we can never do without plastic completely, but we can make certain consumer products more resource efficient. And a modular design like this opens up really good possibilities when a shoe is worn out. In principle, like changing the tyres on a car. You don't throw the whole car away, even if the body gradually gets damaged, but you basically just change the tyre.
For Nico's sports shoes, that means...
So here, with 7,000 pairs sold, just to put a number on it, and each end customer re-equipping them once, that's an entire ton of plastic that we haven't had to produce at all, because the product is being used for longer and actually doesn't become waste just because of normal wear and tear.
8 million disposable sports shoes bought in Germany each year result in 11.5 tons of plastic waste. In selected sports shops or online retainers, Nico's shoes cost 190 euros. That means they're not that much more expensive than those from conventional manufacturers. Is it worth it?
The success of this will come in the future, and not just in the last few months, or right now in the present.
Nico is convinced that we are now paying more and more attention to open supply chains for our consumer products. So how does the shoe go down with amateur athletes? Our editor Lena takes the test. She runs on different terrain and with different studs because these rubber components are not only there for tire changes. 4 degrees of hardness guarantee an individual fit and the right grip. I'm quite satisfied. I was skeptical about the sole at the beginning, but it really feels like a stable sole. Really comfortable to wear. They are also very light. That is always particularly important for me with sports shoes. So running on the studs is comfortable. So finally, a rather extraordinary number. With this shoe, Nico has run 1,600 test kilometers.
So with this shoe, we've shown that shoes like this can definitely last 3 times as long as conventional shoes.
The young entrepreneur's wish for the future is for his shoes to last even longer. And that's why, for us, the eternal running shoe made in Germany is a real green hero.
Claudio Spadaccini is not some young entrepreneur tinkering with a brilliant idea in his garage at home. He's an experienced engineer. He's already built up a global energy company and sold it again in order to improve the world with his CO2 battery.
To me, the motivation is really to try to make an impact. You cannot challenge the status quo if you don't have, a motivation which is higher than just money. The CO2 battery can really be one of the key technology which can allow a faster and deeper penetration of renewable and can really accelerate the decarbonization of the planet.
In their Milan office, the engineer and his team are working on the realization of their dream, an environmentally friendly battery. Cheap to produce, available everywhere. The decisive flash of inspiration came to him while traveling.
When I got the idea, I was in Zurich and on my, let's say, travel back by train to Milan, I started to make all the calculation to understand if, what I had in mind was, let's say, good enough to be, let's say, competitive. I had no one single day of, let's say, doubt or, let's say, I never had the idea to give up.
At the time, the inventor drew this sketch on the train. Almost 2.5 years later, his vision is a reality. You can find it in Sardinia, the world's first CO2 battery. Despite the abundance of sunshine, coal is burned on the island to generate electricity because solar energy is not available around the clock. Sardinia now wants to switch entirely to renewable energies. Ideal conditions for the CO2 battery because it can store the sustainably produced energy. This is how it works. The large dome contains gaseous CO2. Wind turbines and solar panels produce energy and power a compressor, which strongly compresses the gas. This liquefies it and makes it extremely cold. The liquid CO2 is easy to store. At night, when solar energy is not available, the liquid CO2 is heated up again. It evaporates and expands significantly. The resulting pressure is used to drive the generator via a turbine, a kind of bicycle dynamo that generates electricity again.
Having an investment cost of almost half of lithium-ion batteries and a lifespan of more than 3 times longer than lithium-ion batteries, we can achieve a cost per kilowatt-hour delivered which is almost less than half. We are not talking about new material science. We don't need, let's say, 10 years of long research and development, but this has just been a very good idea.
It's an invention we can really use, because to fight climate change, we're relying on renewable energies, mainly solar and wind energy. It's cheap and it doesn't produce CO2 or nuclear waste. The problem is that the sun and wind don't deliver an even supply of energy throughout the day and night. That's why it's important to store the energy generated so that the electricity grid is not overloaded. and so that we can always access the electricity when we need it. In short, there can be no transition to green energy without effective energy storage. Lithium-ion batteries like those in mobile phones or electric cars are one option. However, their production is more complicated and expensive. Lithium extraction and disposal of the batteries pose huge environmental problems. Claudio Spadaccini and his team want to solve all these problems in one go with their CO2 battery. For many potential customers, this initially sounded like a fairy tale.
Just sounded too good. Most of the people normally, feel that we are just lying, we are just saying something which is wrong. But, it is real, for us, and we have demonstrated, because now the plant is there and is operating. We are just very, much focused on the target, and we don't fear about, let's say, those risks. We have to be brave enough.
Another advantage: no high-tech factories are needed to manufacture the CO2 battery. It's made entirely of steel components. No lithium or other expensive raw materials. The parts needed have been in use in the oil industry for decades and are available everywhere.
The dream which we have here in Energy Dome is the dome to become the icon of the energy transition. If you just dial on Google and you make, let's say, renewable energy or energy transition, for sure you will see a 3 blades wind turbine. We would like to have the dome to become the same icon beside the 3 blades turbine or solar PV panel in this transition.
The potential of the CO2 battery has now also been recognized by investors. An Italian energy company wants to start building a large CO2 battery this year, and it's going to store 25 times as much electricity as the prototype in Sardinia.